Hello and welcome to our Bible study, continuing series, What We Need to Know About World Religions. The concept behind this is that if we can know more about the religious faiths of people around us, as well as our own, then we can be more, not just understanding and tolerant, but respectful, understanding better where people are coming from. That's my hope in this. Today we begin a 2-week overview introduction to Buddhism. What we need to know about Buddhism, part 1. So what may be familiar about Buddhism to those of us in the Abrahamic faiths, the monotheistic faiths, is that Buddhism tells a story, the story of the Buddha. The founder, whose name was Siddhartha Gautama, lived in northern India in the mid-500s BCE, before the Common Era, or before Christ, around 500 in that period. He grew up in a royal family and was raised as a prince. His title, Buddha, means the awakened one or the enlightened one. He comes from a Hindu background and was not so much a message giver as we think of Muhammad or many of the prophets, but he was an example of how to live. He developed a distinctive response to the religious problems of his day. And it seems more and more that that's what many of the religions that we have studied so far have done. The founders, the adherents, are responding to issues in their world. The Buddha created a community and started a religious movement, an order of monks and nuns to pass on the traditions and teachings. There were familiar patterns of ritual and worship, sacred images and sacred sites, rites of passage in life, and pilgrimages to important shrines. Buddhists continue to teach people how to confront and deal with the deepest questions of life. What will happen to me when I die? How can I live and be happy? How can I be at peace? How can I be more compassionate? How can I be free from suffering? Buddhists have distinct answers to these questions. What may be unfamiliar and maybe even a little surprising about Buddhism to many of us, Buddhists deny the existence of a single almighty God. There are no theistic gods. A theistic God is a particular being, God as a being. There are no theistic gods in Buddhism, which means it is technically an atheistic religion. Theistic means there's a particular being who is God. But special powers are given to the Buddha, and there are a variety of godlike beings in Buddhism. The tradition begins simply with a human being who discovered a solution to the problem of human suffering. There are legends about Siddhartha, how as a child he had circles imprinted on his skin that marked him as a turner of the wheel of samsara. This goes into Hinduism, and we'll talk about that a little more in depth. But samsara, the wheel, is kind of the grind of life, and not only life in one lifetime, but the multiple thousands, even millions of lifetimes that are part of the process of reincarnation. It's not a happy thought in Hinduism or in Buddhism. But anyway, as a child, Siddhartha, the Buddha, was marked, at least according to legend, with these circles that marked him as a turner of the wheel of samsara. He told others that he was on his last lifetime, which, again, in the parlance of Hinduism, is the goal for people to be able to go through the multiple lives of reincarnation and eventually to get off the wheel. No more samsara. He told others what people seem to think that he was destined to be a great political or military leader or a great religious leader. So his father, trying to spare him the heartache of being a religious reformer, kept him in the palace, raised him sheltered from suffering. But one day, Siddhartha saw a sick person, a poor person, a dead person, and a wandering ascetic. In Hinduism, this would be someone in the forest dweller stage of life. Troubled by the suffering he saw, he left the palace to make sense of that suffering, and he tried the paths of rigid asceticism and he almost starved himself to death. He could see that path was no good. He had already seen and even tried the easy path of wealth and indulgence, and he felt that that was no good either. And so he found a middle path with no extremes of gluttony or asceticism. He encountered the temptations of the flesh and other worldly temptations, but one day he sat down under a tree and did some intense meditation. Finally, he woke up to the truth, to enlightenment. He achieved the state of nirvana, meaning literally to extinguish or to blow out the candle, the causes of suffering, by extinguishing the desire, feeding the fire of death and rebirth. Again, very, very much a Hinduist thought. He began teaching and began turning the wheel of Dharma, the wheel of teaching. He died at age 80, and his body was cremated, and the artifacts of his life were preserved for people to visit and to see. The Buddha offered challenging perspectives on basic religious questions. What is ultimate reality? How can I know it? Does it love me? He believed there was no immortal human soul, a perspective that's very different in many ways from classic Hinduism. He believed that the human soul is an illusion, a human creation from a need for something permanent, and that the self may well be illusory. Buddhism itself is constantly changing, very different today than in the past, and very different in different cultures. One question it asks is this: is there any value or belief that remains constant? The basics of Buddhism lie in the triple refuge. I take refuge in the Buddha, his life, legend, his presence. I take refuge in the Dharma, his teaching. And I take refuge in the Sangha, the community. The Buddha left two bodies after his death, his final death, with no more rebirth: his form body and his teachings, his Dharma. His form body was for those who would worship or venerate the Buddha. It included relics from his cremation. For example, his followers divided his ashes and kept some ashes. It is believed that all the Buddha's relics will one day gather at the Bodhi tree where he did attain enlightenment, and then reform his body sitting cross-legged. The Buddha's 4 eye teeth were also divided, and each were venerated. Objects that he touched, places he visited, his statues or images, these are all venerated. The Buddha's teachings are called Dharma. A summary of his first sermon, I don't know if I can even say this word, Dhammakapavatana Sutta, a discourse on the turning of the wheel of Dharma. These teachings are in the language of Pali, which is a form of Sanskrit. There are 4 noble truths on the turning of the wheel. First, the truth of suffering, dukkha. That is, all is suffering. All of life is suffering. Things cause physical or mental pain, like driving a car into the back of a bus. That causes physical and mental pain. There's suffering due to change, because even pleasurable things cause pain when they pass away. Like with that same car, that image, if you watch that same car slowly deteriorate over time, that causes pain. There's pain in the midst of pleasure, such as the pleasure based on an illusion about the nature of an object or of the self. Thinking, for example, that your sense of self will actually be enhanced by having a nice car. And the truth of the arising of suffering, the 3 marks of existence: ignorance that leads to desire, and desire that leads to birth, rebirth. So the first truth of the 4 noble truths was the truth of suffering. The second, the truth is that everything is suffering. This is not pessimistic, it's just realistic for the Buddhists. The cause of suffering is trying to hold on to what is transitory, trying to prevent the changing. Everything changes means everything is becoming new, which results in a sense of lightness and freedom if we can let go. Everything is impermanent, and nothing has any self. That is, all is no self. There's no permanent identity through time. The illusion of permanence is like the flow of a river. You watch the river, it seems permanent, but it's always changing. The drops of water are always moving past. Or the flame of a candle, same idea. So if there's no permanence, we might ask, what is it that's reborn? It is, Buddha would say, the stream or the flame of consciousness that is reborn. There's no need to hold on to the cycle of death and rebirth. The third of the Noble Truths is the truth of the cessation of suffering, and that is nirvana. The awareness of no self strips away desires so that the fire of samsara can go out. This takes many lifetimes and a great deal of work. Nirvana comes really at two moments, according to the Buddha. There's the moment of awakening or enlightenment called nirvana with residues, and also the moment of death, that is nirvana without residues. Nirvana is the concept of negating the negative life and the experiences of freedom, of being unbound, peaceful, wise, unattached, free and spontaneous, having a clarity of mind with compassion for the suffering of others. And in the fourth of the Four Noble Truths is the truth of the path to nirvana, the cessation of suffering. There are 8 categories of this path. There's right understanding, right thought, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration. To summarize these 8 categories, there's moral conduct, called sila. There's mental concentration, called samadhi. There's the focus and clarity of mind, and there's wisdom, pa'a, which is the understanding of no self. And there are the equivalent of 10 commandments. There are 5 moral precepts for lay people, for all of us. No killing, no stealing, no lying, no abuse of sex, and no drinking of intoxicants. For monks, there are 3 additional precepts. You cannot eat after noon, you cannot sleep on soft beds, and you cannot handle gold or silver. The purpose of such practices is to avoid bad karma and to cultivate wisdom, the detachment leading to nirvana. So in Buddhism, we have the Buddha, taking refuge in the Buddha, and refuge in the Dharma, the teaching. But there's also taking refuge in the community, the last of the 3 refuges of Buddhism. The Buddha attracted many followers in his lifetime. Most became monks. Early each morning, monks would go out begging for food. Lay people gained the chance to practice renunciation by giving them food. The monks eventually developed a settled and ordered life. They would get together to recite the Buddha's teaching and to interpret its meaning. It was a reminder of the middle path, not hedonistic, not extremely ascetic, and eventually they established an authoritative body of doctrine and disciplines. Buddhism originally denied requests to have an order of nuns. They eventually relented and believed that nuns could achieve nirvana, but with additional restrictions, and they would always be inferior in status to monks. Monks believed that lay people could accrue good karma and achieve nirvana eventually, but primarily through being generous to monks and supporting the monasteries. They could also accrue it by going to temples with Buddha likenesses or artifacts and through meditation to calm the mind. And out of these communities, there developed 3 baskets called the Tripitaka. There's the basket of discipline. These are the rules and customs of the Sangha, of the community. There are the basket of discourses. These are the sermons and utterances by the Buddha and his close disciples. And there's the basket of special or higher doctrine. And these are detailed psychophilosophical analyses of the Dharma, of the teaching of the Buddha. Doctrinal teachings of the Buddha were remembered and recited. So this is, again, just a beginning introduction, and we'll follow up next week with a little more about Buddhism, what it means, what it's like to be Buddhist. And I hope that you'll join me for that. Thank you so much. God bless you.